Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off, because today I'll be reviewing Call of Cthulhu, Doors to Darkness from Chaosium Inc. Are these 5 adventures perfect for beginning keepers to get started in the world of Call of Cthulhu? Or are these alleged tales of terror certain to only induce yawns in your players as opposed to anything else? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I'll be reviewing Call of Cthulhu, Doors to Darkness from Chaosium Inc. Written by Christopher Smith Adair, Glenn Owen Barris, Brian Coutremanche, Tom Lynch, Kevin Ross, and Brian M. Sammons. This 144-page hardcover is available for an MSRP of $34.95. If you order from Chaosium, you will also receive the PDF. If you want just the PDF alone, that can be had over at DriveThruRPG for $17.48. So let's swing on over to the other camera, because here I've got Doors to Darkness. A couple of things before we pop on in. First off, I do want to mention the fine folks over at Chaosium Inc. were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share my thoughts about this book with you. These days, it's important for you to know that. Also, there are spoilers ahead. This is an adventure book. I am going to try to avoid major spoilers, but there will be some spoilers. So if you're a player hoping that your keeper is going to run any of these adventures, I'm going to recommend that you take a peek at another video here on the channel. There's over 1,000. And you don't want to ruin the magic of playing in these adventures and finding these things out for the first time. So I'm going to stay picture in picture up here in the corner. So I am going to cut off a little bit of the left side of the book as we take a peek through. We're not going to look at each and every page, but we are going to take a peek at each of the adventures. I'll discuss them a little bit, and then, of course, provide my final thoughts and a review score. So, taking a peek at the back of the book, 5 scenarios for beginning keepers. Doors to Darkness provides 5 scenarios written especially for beginning keepers and players of Call of Cthulhu. Here you'll find horror, mystery, investigation, ghastly monsters, strange magics, and forgotten secrets, as well as plenty of advice about how to run the adventures for best effect. As well as the scenarios, an essay by Kevin Ross details a wide range of hints and tips on running Call of Cthulhu, guidance any keeper, new or experienced, will find very useful. Of course, it talks about each of the adventures. I won't be reading that because we're going to jump on in and take a peek. So we've got excellent production quality. We've got our little bookmark there that we see in all the Chaosium books now. It's kind of a European thing, even though these books are, Chaosium's an American company. But like to see that. Excellent artwork throughout. We've got a lot of artists involved as well in this book. So we get a bit of an introduction about Call of Cthulhu, and then we get into the essay from Kevin Ross. And I will say, for beginning keepers, there's a lot of really good information in this essay. There's also some tips about playing the game, which is kind of interesting that it's included in this essay, because this is a keeper-facing book. This is not a player-facing book. But if you get the PDF, I guess, you could always print out that section of this essay as well and hand out to the players. I will say that some of the information, a good amount of the information here, is something that if you've been running Call of Cthulhu for quite some time, decades like I have, a lot of this stuff is already second nature to you. But very interesting, very useful. I did enjoy reading through this. There's also some discussion about utilizing real things to inspire your adventures. So this is the Voynich, I think that's how it's pronounced, Voynich manuscript. So a page of it and showing you it and saying, hey, just think of all the fun you could create an adventure around this. Just as an idea of utilizing real things in essentially a horror role-playing game. All right, so we jump into the first adventure, The Darkness Beneath the Hill. And once again, there's going to be some spoilers. And this is an adventure where the investigators are brought on board by a friend who has discovered a tunnel beneath the house that they've just inherited from their family. And they believe this tunnel is actually left over from the illegal slave trade in Rhode Island in, I want to say, the 1750s, thereabouts. And while that is true, that the tunnel was being used to transport slaves, it has a much more sinister purpose as well. This is kind of a dungeon delve, honestly, and you'll see, I'll show you the map here in a second. So this kind of reminds you a little bit of a dungeon delve kind of map. And that's fine. We don't really see that too often in Call of Cthulhu Adventures. This also has a bit of a nod to The Rats in the Walls, the H.P. Lovecraft story. We do have these caverns deep within the earth. We have these subhumans who are like living there, and they're actually enthralled to this serpent man scientist. I don't remember. I don't think he's a wizard. I seem to recall he's a scientist. And they are actually the descendants of slaves and slavers who were captured in this tunnel and brought below as essentially slaves to the serpent man as well. So I like this adventure. I thought it was a pretty good adventure. There's a gate involved as well, so that's kind of a cool introduction to some of the mystical elements of the Lovecraft stories also. Then we have Genius Loci, which takes place at a lunatic asylum. So there is a bit of a warning about that. Some players may be triggered by that. I don't know, especially when you're considering that this is supposed to be in the 1920s. All of these adventures take place around the 1920s, although they don't take a lot of modification to make them modern tales or put them in a different time period if you want, like the 30s. But if you know anything about mental health care back in the 1920s, things were not good. Things were not good. And that is taking place in this adventure. It is an adventure where someone who has checked themselves into the institute is trying to leave, trying to get away. Something very strange is going on, and they're not being allowed to leave. And they contact the investigators to try to help. I got to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of this adventure. It's okay. I don't like the monster that's involved in it. I've never actually been a fan of the monster that is the big bad who's causing all the issues. For one, it's not a Lovecraftian monster. It was not created by Lovecraft. I want to say it's an August Derleth monster, but not a terrible adventure. But one of the aspects that I have kind of an issue with as well is, keep in mind, these adventures are designed for beginning keepers, but they're also designed for beginning investigators. So the possibilities of a total party kill are kind of toned down a little bit in these. Not to say that you're not going to see investigators die in these adventures. You certainly shall. But it's toned down a little bit from some of the kind of typical standard sort of Call of Cthulhu thought processes where you're going to have a lot of character turnover. But the problem here is the conclusion of this adventure. I think most players who have played other role-playing games aren't going to realize that that is actually the best outcome for them. That they're going to try to defeat the monster, and it's not going to happen. So I think this could lead very easily to a total party kill for players who don't realize that a lot of times in Call of Cthulhu, living to fight another day is actually victory. But like I said, it's my least favorite of the adventures. It's not horrible, but it's my least favorite. We've got Servants of the Lake, which if you'd like, you can channel a little bit of Psycho or Motel Hell with this. This is an adventure where the investigators are brought on to find a missing person, which leads them to this remote motel on the edge of this lake. I find this to be a pretty good adventure. I would have a very good time creeping out my players with the NPCs that are in this, as well as the overall big bad is pretty interesting. The creature who's in the lake. There's an interesting backstory to this adventure as well that I liked. Kind of setting the tone for utilizing this with another Call of Cthulhu adventure as well. So something to keep in mind. And as you can see, artwork's really cool. Got all these keeper suggestion boxes and things set along in here. Now, I will point out that these adventures do vary as far as how much additional helpful information is included for the keepers. There's not a specific uniformity to it, but all in all, there's a lot of good tips and things to kind of keep an eye out for or to keep in mind as well. Now, our next adventure is The Ties That Bind. And I have to say, this is my favorite adventure in this book. And for some reason, I could have swore I've seen this adventure someplace before. Now, I could be completely losing it, but I have read this adventure prior to reading this book. So I was like, did I somehow get to take a peek at this book at some point that I don't remember? Because I don't remember the other adventures. So that's what kind of throws me off. I think this is a classic sort of Call of Cthulhu tale in which the player characters, if they piece together the clues and they are not overly difficult to piece together and they pay attention, they can easily come to the correct conclusion on how to successfully complete this adventure without losing any investigators. Now, that's not to say that you won't lose some NPCs, but you will not be losing investigators. And I love the overall aspect of this adventure. There's a good amount going on that's timed, that you have a certain schedule that might throw off some newer keepers, but it's not too in-depth. It's not too complex. But one of the things that I like about this is it, as strange as it sounds, kind of humanizes one of the famous Lovecraftian creatures, which I know it's a monster, it's humanized, but you'll see what I mean when you take a peek at the adventure. I'll kind of sum it up a little bit where if you were to find a bear cub and you were holding that bear cub and Mama Bear showed up, what would you do? I think you know what you should do. So there's also an aspect to this that's kind of interesting where the investigators have to go off into this marsh looking for something, and you can kind of make it kind of spooky with that too. And like I said, all in all, I really do like this adventure, and I think this has a very nice Lovecraftian feel to the proceedings. So that is The Ties That Bind. None More Black is the final adventure. This, to me, is kind of, even though it's the 20s, it's got a far more modern feel to the adventure, where the investigators are, there's a variety of different kinds of characters they could be playing for this adventure. And I have to also point out, these adventures should play out in a single session if you're playing relatively long sessions. So if you play 4 or 5 hour sessions like I do, or longer, usually when I run stuff, you'll easily polish off one of these adventures in a session. So there's a drug that the player characters are trying to kind of discover the source of. And there's more to it than it just being a drug because, hey, come on, it's Call of Cthulhu. And this is an adventure where you could easily see a total party kill. There is some good investigation involved in this. There are a good number of NPCs that the keeper is going to need to kind of understand how they tie together in this adventure as well. There is actually an optional monster that can be utilized in this, which is pretty creepy. It's a pretty creepy monster, but it's not needed for the adventure. Something else to point out that I want to say 2 or 3 of these adventures in the book could easily be modified for a single investigator. All of these adventures are easily playable by 2 investigators as well. So each of the adventures, they call for about 2 to 6 investigators. Now, personally, I think 6 is a lot of people to have in a Call of Cthulhu game. Actually, these days, 6 players plus a game master. That's quite a lot for any game. But I do like the fact that you can scale these very easily. And even though there's 2 adventures where it's not saying that you could make it just for a single player, I think you could. Then we're going to finish up with all the handouts. I know some people complain with the way Chaosium has produced Call of Cthulhu adventure books since the beginning of time, effectively, where the handouts appear in the adventure as well as later on their own, like so. Some people really think that that's just a complete waste of page space and things like that. I disagree, because I like having the handouts right there in the adventure as I'm running it. So I can take a peek at it. I know what's what right there on the page. And then, of course, we also have the handouts to be able to give to your players that are separate from the adventure text. Then we have 10 pre-generated characters that are pretty much usable anywhere. That last adventure, you could actually conceivably play investigators who are mobsters. So kind of like that aspect where it's sort of like, okay, so there's a new drug and they're trying to find out who's peddling this drug so they can either take over the drug or get rid of the competition. So I thought that was kind of cool as well. All right, and then we got an index and some biographies of our authors and the investigator handbook and the Sandy Peterson's field guide to Lovecraftian horrors ads. And that is Doors to Darkness for Call of Cthulhu from Chaosium Inc. Let's swing on over to the other camera so I can provide some final thoughts as well as my review score. So out of the 5 adventures, 4 of them are good. One of them, it's just, some people will really like it. And I actually like adventures that take place in asylums for Call of Cthulhu because it plays so much into the whole Lovecraftian vibe and stories and things like that. I just, like I said, I didn't care for, I don't like the monster. I never have. I don't really care for adventures that feature this thing. And I think the ending is sort of a letdown, kind of anticlimactic, I guess. The other 4 adventures, I like them quite a bit. As I mentioned, the support for the keeper. Some adventures have a little bit more advice for the keepers than others, but they all have lots of points to help iron things out and present them to the players as well. All in all, I think these adventures, even the one I'm not so keen on, could make for an excellent evening of gaming if you're playing a bit of a longer session. They're not going to run more than 2 sessions if you play like 3-hour sessions, something like that. I really like this book. So, all in all, on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Call of Cthulhu Doors to Darkness an 8.5 out of 10. I certainly do recommend it. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It'll not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs right here on YouTube. So I bring you the latest in tabletop gaming news and first looks at tabletop games. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. That's it for this time out. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you gets to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your own gang. Oh, you're still here. Well, while you're kicking it, how about subscribing to the Gaming Gang channel? Or seeing the latest episode of the Gaming Gang Dispatch? Or finding out what YouTube recommends you check out here at my channel? And of course, don't forget, get your geek on at thegaminggang.com.